Hey everybody, and welcome to The Year Was, a podcast all about today. I'm your host Michael Montalvo, and together we take the history train back in time once again to discover what makes today truly unique. For the next few minutes, we continue to gather random nuggets of trivia to make you sound smart, or just drop that little fact that makes others stop and say, hey, who invited you? Like, seriously, why are you here? On this episode, we examine the events that occurred today, July 17th. Today's episode is actually something I've really been looking forward to because it's one of the reasons that I started, or that I really wanted to start this podcast. Don't get me wrong, it's a terrible, sad story, but it also happened on this day. The year was 1918, and on this day, the Romanov family of Russia were executed during the Russian Revolution. I guess in order to talk about the execution, we have to go back and talk a bit about the Russian Revolution. To put it lightly, it completely rocked politics of the 20th century. It was violent, and the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power and brought a political change that led to the formation of the Soviet Union. By 1910, the population of major cities in Russia had doubled. It was overcrowded, and living conditions were poor. And because of this population burst, harsh growing seasons, and war, limited food supplies were in frequent demand. Protests by workers against the monarchy led to the Bloody Sunday Massacre of 1905, where unarmed protesters were attacked by the Tsar's troops. Hundreds of people were killed and wounded. And after this attack, Tsar Nicholas II promised the formation of a series of representative assemblies to work towards reform. But then, the First World War happened. Militarily, Russia was no match for Germany, and suffered casualties greater than any nation in any war before. Food was still in short supply, and fuel was in short supply, and the Russian economy was disrupted by the cost of war. So Tsar Nicholas left Petrograd, renamed from St. Petersburg, in 1915 to take command of the Russian front. With his absence, Tsarina Alexandra fired elected officials, and Grigory Rasputin increased his influence over Russian politics and the Romanov family. Rasputin is a story for another time, but Russian nobles, eager to end his influence over the Tsar's family, murdered him on December 30th, 1916. But by then, most of Russia had lost faith in the Tsar, and moderates joined the radical elements who called for Nicholas II to be overthrown. The February Revolution began March 8, 1917. It's named the February Revolution because it fell on February 23rd on the Julian calendar. Demonstrators shouting for food took to the streets, supported by huge crowds, and protesters clashed with police and refused to leave the streets. The Bolshevik Revolution began on November 6th and 7th, or October 24th and 25th, and were led by party leader Vladimir Lenin. And a nearly bloodless coup d'etat was led against a provisional government assembled by leaders of Russia's bourgeois. Lenin seized power and established the world's first communist state. So, how does the Imperial family fall into all of this? It really came down to a series of bad decisions that stemmed from his belief that as Tsar, he had to rule with an iron fist, going so far as to forbid anyone within the Russian Empire to speak non-Russian. Throughout his reign, Russia was restless. After the Bolshevik Revolution, Nicholas tried to seek asylum with the British and then with the French, but both refused him, and the Romanovs found themselves in the hands of a new revolutionary government. Life became very different for them, and both Nicholas and Alexandra were said to be in denial and refused to give up hope that they would be saved. Both of them, along with their children, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and son Alexei, a doctor, and 3 of their servants, were moved from house to house until they made it to the House of Special Purpose. The house was the Impotiach House Yekaterinburg. I butchered that pronunciation, and it was terrible. That house is going to be important later. The family now lived with no bed linen. Dust was everywhere, and only a few plates and silverware were provided. Soldiers harassed them, and lewd drawings and obscene poems of Alexandra covered the walls. In order to keep busy, they were allowed to walk the courtyard only an hour a day, and when asked why, an officer replied, "So it looks more like a prison to you." Despite the hardships, judging by his diary, Nicholas remained calm, concentrating on small things like dinner being served at 3 instead of at 1. Alexandra, however, wasn't sitting idly by. She and the family's 4 daughters began sewing jewelry into the seams of dresses and coats so that, in the future, they would have something to live on when they were eventually released. After the revolution, civil war broke out between the Red Bolshevik Army and the White Russian forces. By July of 1918, the White Army was advancing into Yekaterinburg, but local authorities were ordered to prevent any Romanov rescue. The Bolsheviks even went so far as to write a fake letter claiming that the family would be rescued and slipped it to them. The Romanovs spent that night fully dressed, waiting for rescue. It was this willingness to attempt an escape, in addition to a secret meeting, that the Imperial family was sentenced to death. On the night of July 16th, the family was ordered to dress and go down to the cellar. No one was sure how to kill the family, with options such as grenades or stabbing in the night being considered, but it was ultimately decided that the family would be woken and taken downstairs in a ruse of safety and protection against oncoming forces. So the family was moved, and with everyone in the basement, Yakov Yurovsky stated that supporters were trying to free the family, and it was his duty to end the family line. Then the shooting started. Nicholas II was killed instantly, but due to the jewels sewn into their clothes, bullets ricocheted off the daughters and Alexandra. They were executed with bayonets and knives. They would not stop until everyone was dead. The Romanov family's bodies were taken and thrown into a mine, but to reduce the chance of the remains being found, soldiers threw them in unmarked graves, doused with acid. That's crazy, but what's really crazy about this is that the story doesn't end there. In the following years, there began rumors that the Grand Duchess Anastasia and her brother Alexei may have survived the execution. Anastasia in particular was believed to be alive, as a number of women claiming to be her would periodically surface. The most famous of which being that of Anna Anderson. Anderson fought to prove that she was Anastasia since the early 20s, but in 1970 the suit brought on by her was rejected, leaving the mystery of the Grand Duchess unsolved. She was later revealed to be Franziska Szakalniska, and it wasn't until later in the decade that archaeologists found a shallow grave with 9 skeletal remains. They were kept secret though, and it wasn't until after the fall of the Soviet Union that forensic evidence identified the bodies as the Imperial family minus Anastasia and her brother. Anderson did not live to see this, however, having died in 1984. Then, in 1998, on this day, July 17th, 80 years after they were murdered, the remains of the royal family that had been found were finally put to rest in St. Petersburg's St. Peter and Paul Cathedral. A ceremony took place where members of the Romanov family and their close relatives traveled the world to attend. A second gravesite was found in 2007, and after DNA testing, the remains of 2 bodies were determined to be that of Alexei and one of his sisters. Now, there is some speculation as to who the second body is. The most likely candidates are either Anastasia or her sister Maria. Some claim that the mystery of the Grand Duchess to be solved with the finding of the bodies, while others claim that the mystery surrounding Anastasia continues. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. We will go into more detail about Rasputin and about Anna Anderson in future episodes, but let me know in the comments what your theories are. And that's going to be it for us today. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find an audio version on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, and Google Play. Pretty much anywhere you get your podcast, links in the description. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, give us a rate and a review. That helps me out and lets me know what direction to keep this going in. And hey, if you liked it, share it with a friend. They might like it too. You can find me on social media and at YouTube at the Apple Cider Club. And as always, I want to thank the Tim Kreitz Band for our musical theme. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.